Shadows is the most ambitious Assassin's Creed game yet, especially when it comes to the amount of RPG elements and new gameplay mechanics, with various skill systems, a robust gear upgrade system, multiple main characters, and nearly a dozen weapons. There's a lot of things that you could potentially be doing wrong and accidentally making the game far harder for yourself than it needs to be. So grab your notepad as we run down the top 10 mistakes that you might be making in Assassin's Creed Shadows that are making you worse. This first thing I have mentioned in a previous video, but it bears repeating because I know a lot of journalists have made articles specifically about this one point because they desperately wanted to rush to the end of the game just so that they could say they'd completed the game in their review. And number one is to stop neglecting side content. If you enjoy the main story so much that you do just want to rush through it, then that is absolutely fantastic. However, by not doing enough side content, you are missing out on knowledge points, which will potentially soft cap your level, because you will be gaining many mastery points throughout leveling up and completing various different challenges and activities and quests. But if you aren't doing side content, you aren't gaining knowledge points. Therefore, you're not leveling up your knowledge, and you're not able to spend your mastery points in your skill trees. And your skill trees are just as important in making you powerful as your actual player level and your gear are. So if you are neglecting all of this side content and you're not increasing your knowledge rank, you're going to make the game so much tougher than it needs to be. So make sure you are prioritizing this and make sure you are doing side content hand in hand with the main story. For tip number 2, make sure you are always completing their mini activities you get to go and find new merchants and vendors, because quite a few of them can and will sell quest items. They will have many unique items such as teapots, cosmetics, and other quest items. And if a purchasable item tells you it's a quest item, that doesn't necessarily mean you have that quest. But what it does mean is that if you don't buy it now, you're potentially really going to struggle when trying to find that item again later on in the game. It can be an absolute nightmare when you've unlocked very many shops trying to figure out where that tea set was that you now need 40 hours later. So every time you see something unique in a shop, make sure you buy it there and then so that you don't lose track of it. Or if you somehow do not have the 300 mon to spend, do yourself a favor and write it down so you know where it is later. Next up, as you probably know by now, in Assassin's Creed Shadows, they have limited certain areas in the open world where you can parkour, and now it is very difficult to scale mountains, as it should be. This adds a level of realism to the game that we haven't seen before, but it can also make it quite frustrating, especially if you're a seasoned veteran and you are used to being able to scale everything in the game. And there is a chance you're just going to keep bashing your face against this mountain until it finally lets you up. And I'm not going to lie, they say you can't grapple onto anything, but 80% of the time, if you brute force it hard enough, you can. However, you're going to get really stressed out doing so because visibility is poor, you have no idea where the mountain will and won't let you up, and if you just stop being stubborn and agree to use the Pathfinder mechanic, you're going to have a much better, much more relaxed time and probably get to your destination quicker as well. This next tip is very crucial to really understanding combat, which especially in the late game becomes such a priority because gameplay actually becomes quite tough when you hit around level 40, at least on the higher difficulties anyway. And this is the difference between ability damage, weapon damage, posture damage, and status effects. Now, status effects is pretty self-explanatory. That's things like bleed, poison, and daze. You've got weapon damage, which is your raw damage output when you are just using standard light or heavy attacks. You've got your ability damage, which will sometimes look tremendously inflated, and you'll see weapons that do tens of thousands of ability damage. But if you actually look at the abilities themselves, it says this ability deals 8% of your ability damage 12 times or something like this. So it's not as crazy as you'd think. And it's definitely worth keeping these percentages in mind. And then you've also got posture damage. This is the one that's the least explained. And posture damage is dealt by a posture attack. Sounds straightforward enough, yeah? And a posture attack is simply a fully charged R1 or R2 attack. Saying fully charged sounds a bit over dramatic because it literally takes, I think, like 1 second to charge your attack. But when you see and hear that visible shing, that means you now have a posture attack ready. And there are many other abilities tied to your gear and tied to your masteries that will allow you to use posture attacks more frequently. And posture attacks are very powerful because they are an instant guaranteed stagger on most enemies in the game. I think some bosses might be slightly immune to them, but basically everything will get instantly staggered to a posture attack. So if you use a build that can chain these posture attacks frequently, you're going to be staggering all your opponents and they won't be able to do anything to you. So make sure you learn the difference between weapons, ability, statuses, and posture, and tailor your builds accordingly depending on what you use the most. This next tip is just something that's going to make hideout management a lot easier for you. Please create spaces between your buildings. Add in little walkways. Even if you're not someone that likes to spend hours doing all of these fancy decorations, if you decide to give every building the same decor, then they will all look identical and your hideout can very quickly become confusing. So if you are trying to go from room to room, managing your allies, using the map, replenishing your supplies, picking up contracts, it can quickly get very confusing which room you're in and where one building ends and the next one starts. So create at least a 1x1 walkway in between each room so you know where they are starting and ending. This next tip is another hideout tip, and it is to regularly check building upgrades at your hideout, especially the main 5 like the forge and stable, etc. They can give you absolutely huge boosts to your game. And like I said earlier, if you're focusing on rushing through the main story too quickly, you are potentially going to be missing out on huge boosts to your gameplay. Just a couple of examples. The more you upgrade the forge, the more efficient smuggling resources becomes, and the more you upgrade your study, the more scouts you have to use on the various scouting activities. And also, as you are upgrading all of these buildings, you will unlock a plethora of additional passive bonuses. The last one in specific, when you get to level 10, means that now when you smuggle resources, it will no longer just be hideout upgrade materials, it will also be crafting upgrade materials, which is super powerful and is going to save you a lot of time and money in the long run. Next up, the third and final hideout related tip for this video. Whilst you're there, do yourself a favor, head to the forge, obviously once you've unlocked the blacksmith, and make sure you are using engravings. When you've upgraded your forge once, you can use non-legendary engravings, and once you've upgraded it to max, you can use legendary engravings. And some of these are absolutely ridiculous. I think probably my absolute favorite, it's quite niche, but it fits in perfectly with the Naoe Kusarigama build that we're going to potentially show off if enough people want it. And that is a 75% damage to armor increase as long as you hit multiple enemies. And many Kusarigama attacks hit multiple enemies quite easily, so this will absolutely instantaneously strip everyone around you of their armor. Absolutely devastating. Some engraving combinations are crazy good, so make sure you are collecting them as you go around the world, and make sure you come back here and use them intermittently. Very important to do so. Another mechanic that you might be neglecting more than you should is Observe. This is different to Eagle Vision, which is exclusive to Naoe. This is usable by both characters, and it is incredibly powerful because not only will it show various loot and rations and tools replenishments through walls, but it will also show you special enemies through walls. So even if you do have a preference for Yasuke because he's an absolute god in combat and you want to clear out castles as him, it doesn't need to be any more difficult to track down the likes of these samurai commanders, because you can still use observe to show them up even through walls, because they count as objectives. So they will show up even if you are looking through multiple walls, as long as they're in range. And obviously another non-combat use for observe is it will allow you to quite easily track down all of the objectives for the various quests you will do throughout the game. So you'll use scouts initially to do the investigation portion of the quest, and then once you've narrowed down the area, when you get there you can instantly find whoever you're looking for by using observe, rather than having to aimlessly run around until you hopefully stumble upon them. Next up, we just mentioned scouts because of their use in investigations, but in my opinion their most important use is to use them to smuggle supplies, because this will allow you to upgrade your hideout so much quicker than if you don't smuggle them really big juicy pallets of supplies. So this tip specifically is to make sure that you always go into big castles and encampments with 2 or 3 scouts available, because there's nothing worse than seeing 3 pallets of supplies lined up, hundreds and hundreds of resources waiting to be stolen, and then you realize you've gone in with 0 scouts left to spare. It's an absolute nightmare. Obviously now you can go back to a Kakurega and you can pay to replenish your scouts, or you can skip to the next season, but it's just such a ball ache to do things this way when you could have just entered the encampment with your scouts ready and available at the start. So please make sure you're always checking this before you go into a big combat section. And finally, this is another late game tip. Do not be lulled into a false sense of security with Naoe in combat. Don't try and rush in and fight dozens of enemies like you would with Yasuke. Even though this is doable in the early game, and I mean technically it's doable in the late game if you have a really good build for her, which, as I've said multiple times now, I will bring out if you want me to. For the most part, usually she isn't particularly good in combat, especially not when compared to him anyway. She is an assassin, she's a shinobi, she's not there to go toe to toe with the absolute most badass samurai. She's there to sneak around and stab them in the back. So the long and short of it, this tip is to stop rushing in and trying to fight with Naoe the same as you would with Yasuke. They're both very different characters, designed extremely differently, and make sure you do use them as such, and you're going to have a much better time with Assassin's Creed Shadows. That's it, my friends. They are my top 10 things that you are potentially doing in Shadows that are making you worse. If at least one of them helped, then I hope that earned your subscription, and thank you so much for everyone who is already subscribed. With that, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.